Good evening. You might want to pull this out of your bulletin, these the notes that are slipped into there. Take notes along the way. I was thinking as I was driving in here, 20-0 at halftime. Maybe we should just dive into Lamentations tonight and learn how to grieve better than we do now, but we're not going to do that. We're going to dive into a couple of stories of Jesus. Now, Jesus has lots of stories because he's a storyteller. In fact, Jesus tells stories about 20% of the time, about 1/5 of the time when he's teaching, he's telling a story. And if you think about today, what is the greatest storytelling medium of our day? Back then with Jesus, it was obviously oral. They told stories orally, and that's in fact how they passed on the story of the Bible. But today, if Jesus was walking around today, he would certainly use the most powerful storytelling medium that we have, which is film. There's nothing that tells a more powerful story than film. And so tonight we're going to take a look at a couple of scenes from one of my favorite films. And the reason we're going to do this is a little thing that Paul said in Romans chapter 1. So Paul says this extraordinary thing right off the bat. He essentially says, hey, if you say that you not accountable to what God has asked you to do, you actually have no excuse, because God has actually planted himself, his very personality and characteristics in all of creation. In fact, God has infiltrated everything he's created, and even the creative process is embedded like with his DNA. So Paul says this extraordinary thing. He says nobody is not accountable, because we can all just pay attention to the things that God created, the trees, the mountains, the sky, the clouds. All of these things have this little hint of God's personality in them if we just pay attention. And the same is true also for all created things. Now, this is how shrewd God is. He plants himself in all created things, no matter whether the person who's doing the creating knows what they're doing or not. He's quite shrewd. So this is why you can watch a film and see Jesus in the film, even when the film has nothing to do with Jesus whatsoever. So I lead a group of young people, about 20 young people, in my home every week, and I've been doing this for a long time. And one of our traditions is we have Friday night film nights. We do this probably, 4, 5, 6 times a year. Now, the ethic behind a film night is we invite them to come over at 6 o'clock for pizza, and at 7 o'clock we start the film. I usually tell them what the film is. Sometimes I keep it from them because I don't want them to know ahead of time. But the preamble to that is always, we're going to watch a film that's not about Jesus, and then for about an hour and a half, we're going to talk about Jesus. So for the kids who come for the first time, they're like totally confused by this. How are we going to talk about Jesus and watching a film that's not about Jesus? We watch all kinds of films. I think the worst film we ever watched on film night was Aquaman. Terrible film, fantastic conversation about Jesus afterwards. But that's what we do. We watch films. I ask them to look for things in the film while we're watching it, and then afterwards I just ask them a lot of questions, and we see if we can find Jesus in the film. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to do this with a movie called Dead Poets Society. I'm going to use a short, less than 3-minute clip from Dead Poets Society. So how many of you seen the film Dead Poets Society? Okay, good. Quite a few of you. For those of you who haven't, very basic setup for the story of this film. So it's set in the 1950s in an all-boys boarding school. And in this school, all the boys wear uniforms. Everything's a tight ship. It's like going to college. And this is the story of a new English professor who's just been hired, who once was a student at this very school. Now he's kind of made a name for himself. They had an opening. They hire him. His name is John Keating. So there's a lot of energy around John Keating's arrival. He's like not the prodigal son, but the favorite son coming back to his school to teach. And he has very, very unusual, surprising ways of engaging his students, as is evident right away. And he starts to cause a stir almost immediately amongst the faculty because he doesn't teach like the other teachers teach. So the scene we're going to watch is early on, soon after John Keating's arrived at this school. His students are still trying to get to understand what he's about. They don't have a category for this guy. Now, the scene we're going to see is in a poetry class, and John Keating has assigned to all of the students that they have to create an original poem and then present it in front of the class. So in the scene we're going to watch, he asks a young man named Todd Anderson if he has completed the assignment. And he asks him to come up and give his poem. And you're going to see that Todd says, "No, I haven't." So here's what I want you to do as we're watching this scene for the first time. Oh, by the way, this is an interesting little sidelight. In this scene we're going to watch, it's Robin Williams who plays John Keating on the right, and that's a young Ethan Hawke on the left. He plays a guy named Todd Anderson. Those are the two characters we're going to pay attention to in this scene. So Ethan Hawke said that the scene that we're about to watch, which was planned but unscripted, was the scene that he had performed in a film that made him realize he could be an actor, he could make a living as an actor. What happened in this scene convinced him that he could actually be an actor for the rest of his life because it was planned and unscripted. So what he did told himself that he could do this. So those are the two characters we're going to watch. Go ahead and flip the questions up there. Here's the questions I want you to think about. We're actually going to watch this scene twice, the exact same scene twice. The first time, I just want you to pay attention to the young man, Todd Anderson. Just focus on your attention on him. And here's the questions I want you to think about as we're watching. What are all the things we know about Todd based only on this short clip? And then the second question is like it. What is the weed that's planted in the garden of Todd's heart? What's the weed that's planted there? So study him, pay attention to all the subtleties that you can pick out in this scene, and then in just a minute, I'm going to actually have you talk to somebody next to you about what you observe. So get ready. I'll just have you turn and talk about these two questions. So let's go ahead and watch the first scene. Pay attention only to Todd. The first question is, what are all the things you know about him based only on this clip, and what's the weed growing in his heart? Let's go ahead and watch. Okay? All right. Now, this is very important. I don't want you to sit alone and stare at these questions. I'd like you to find a partner and talk to them. So, gang, the crowd, if you see someone alone, they're sitting a little away from someone, just approach them and say, let's talk. Very simple question. What are all the things we know about Todd based only on this short clip? And what do you think the weed that is growing in his heart is? All right? Go ahead and turn to a person and talk about those for a couple of minutes here. The challenge is, what are all the things you know about Todd from this? Not just one thing. Keep going. Keep going. What are all the things you can discern about Todd from this clip? All right, I have a whiteboard up here because I'm going to write down real quick some things that you observed. So all I want you to do is, don't be shy, just call them out. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. I will try to, if I can't hear you, I'll ask you to say it again. So what are some things we know about Todd just based only on this clip? Just call them out. He's embarrassed. Got that one. What else? He's shy. What else? He's insecure. I missed the other one. What's that? Not prepared. What else? Unconfident. I'm going to hyphenate that. I'm not sure that's an actual word, and I'm an editor, so. Unconfident. It works for me, though. What's that? Way with words. What else? What's that? He trusts or he doesn't trust? Oh, he did trust. He trusted. Brave. Good imagination. What about the weed in his heart? What do you think's growing there? Unworthiness? Unworthiness, I think I heard low self-esteem. What else? Self-doubt. What else? Anything else? Fear. What's that? Self-judgment. Did I hear lonely? Good. Thank you. Thank you, me. Shame. Okay, let's stop there. So here's what we know about Todd. He's embarrassed and shy. He has a good imagination. He's insecure. He's not prepared. He's not unconfident. He has a way with words. He trusted. He's brave. He feels a sense of unworthiness. He has low self-esteem. He has self-doubt, fear, self-judgment, lonely. Shame probably covers a lot of that, doesn't it? So we can say that when it starts out, Todd is captive to all of these very powerful words, especially this word, shame. There is no greater captivity than shame. It folds into itself all of these things: low self-esteem, self-doubt, fear, self-judgment. This is why it takes great courage and bravery to get up in front of everybody in the midst of all that shame, right? So now we're going to watch this a second time. Let's flip up the next question there, Jay. This time we're going to watch John Keating. Only pay attention to him. Here's the question. What is John Keating doing and why? Afterward, we'll talk about the second question together as a group. The first one the only question I want you to think about is, what is he doing and why is he doing it? Very simple. Let's watch again.
Now, who's next? Mr. Anderson, you're sitting there in agony. Come on, pal, step up. Let's put you out of your misery.
I didn't do that, man.
Mr. Anderson thinks everything inside of him is worthless and embarrassing. Isn't that right, Todd? That's your worst fear. I think you're wrong. I think you have something inside of you that is worth a great deal. I sound my barbaric law. Rooftops of the world. Uncle Walt again. Now, for those of you who don't know, a yelp is a loud cry or yell. Now, Todd, I would like you to give us a demonstration of a barbaric yelp. Come on, you can't yelp sitting down. Come on, up. Now get in yelping stance.
A yaw.
No, that is a yelp. A barbaric yelp.
Yaw.
Come on, louder.
Yaw.
Oh, that's a mouse. Come on, louder.
Yaw.
We got to get like that.
There it is.
You see, you're a barbarian and you after all. Now, you don't get away that easy. Picture Uncle Walt up there. What does he remind you of? Don't think of it.
Man.
What kind of madman?
Well, come on, just answer this. A crazy man.
No, you can do better than that. Free up your mind. Use your imagination. Say the first thing that pops into your head, even if it's total gibberish.
A swiny-toothed madman.
Good God, boy. There's a poet in you after all. There, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Close them. Now, describe what you see.
I close my eyes.
Yes.
I distinguish folks beside me.
Sweaty-toothed madman.
The swiny-toothed madman with a stare that pounds my brain.
Oh, that's excellent. Now give him action. Make him do something.
His hands reach out and choke me. And all the time he's mumbling.
What's he mumbling?
Mumbling truth.
Yes.
Truth, like a blanket that always leaves your feet cold.
Forget them. Stay with the blanket. Tell me about that blanket.
You kick, you push it, stretch it, it'll never be enough. You kick at it, beat it, it'll never cover any of us. From the moment we enter crying to the moment we leave dying, it'll just cover your face as you wail and cry and scream.
Forget this. Now.
Okay. Turn back to the person you were talking to and just talk about this question. What is John Keating doing and why? Think of everything you can pick out. Go. Okay, I hear the talk lowering to a whisper. So let's get some feedback here. What is John Keating doing and why is he doing it? Just throw some stuff out here. It's not a right answer here. We're just exploring. What was that? Created a safe place. What was that over here? Pushing him to succeed. Okay, what else?
Forcing.
Say that again. Forcing. Yep. Encouraging, and I heard take out of comfort zone. What else? Persisting. That's a powerful word. Persisting. Focusing. Affirming. Let's stop there. Wow. He created a safe space. He's pushing him to succeed. He's forcing him actually to succeed. He's encouraging him. He's pushing him out of his comfort zone. He's persisting. He's focusing. He's affirming. He's also fierce, right? There's a lot of risk in what he does. Let's go to the next question. Based on what you've just seen, we're watching a film that's not about Jesus. Now let's talk about Jesus. What are all the ways that Keating is like Jesus in this scene? What reminds you of Jesus as you watch Keating engage Todd Anderson? What are some things that make you think of Jesus when you see him? Always asking questions. I love that. What else? He's pushing him. He's not afraid to push. We have a wrong idea of Jesus sometimes, that he's a lamb-carrying nice guy. No, he's pretty ferocious. If you slow down and pay attention to what he actually does, he pushes. Maybe sometimes he pushes way farther than we would. What else? What's that? He's leading. He's leading him. So he's guiding him towards something. He has a goal toward it. Yeah. I saw somebody over here. Oh, he has faith in him even when he has no faith in himself. Yeah, that's extraordinary, isn't it? We've all been impacted by people who have faith in us when we have had no faith in ourselves. Say it again. He's helping him out. He sees he has a need. He responds to the need. What else? He makes us uncomfortable. Yeah, Jesus is maybe the most uncomfortable person that's ever lived. In fact, the primary, I love what Peter Kreeft says about Jesus when he describes him. He calls him a extraordinary wonder, like an explosion, like he's a rolling grenade. As he rolls into these encounters, he makes us uncomfortable. What else? Say it again. He's making him feel known and seen. And in fact, that's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because the one thing that Todd doesn't want to do is stand in front of everybody and deliver a poem. And he forces him to do that. And in the process, something magical happens. He helps him to be seen, maybe for the first time. What a tremendous risk. Somebody said something back here. He sees his potential. He doesn't limit him to his captivity now. He's releasing him into something. Anything else? Shows him he's not alone. Yeah, he's fighting for him. And that is the most powerful way to show someone they're not alone, is when you fight for them. Jesus did it all the time. What? I heard one last one over here. I'm sorry, what? He was present. Boy, was he. Don't pay attention to them. Focus on me. Yeah, because we need to hear the truth about ourselves. So, embedded in this story that's not about Jesus, there's a lot about Jesus in this. Jesus, early on in his ministry, comes back to his hometown of Nazareth, and he goes to the synagogue on the Sabbath, and he's handed the scroll of Isaiah 61. Now, we read this, we've probably read this before, when he's introducing himself for the first time, really, to people in his hometown who saw him grow up, by the way. He's the carpenter's son. He's been in charge of the business, his father's business, since his father passed away. Most theologians think that Jesus' father passed away at some point. He's the oldest son. It comes to him to run the business. He's well known in town. He stands up at the synagogue on the Sabbath. He's handed the scroll that has Isaiah 61 in it. Interesting little rabbit trail. During the Babylonian exile, the Torah and the prophets, the scrolls of the Old Testament scriptures, were destroyed by the invaders. So the Jews tried to keep the remaining scrolls from being confiscated and destroyed. The way they did that is they doled them out to the families. So if you were in Nazareth, your family was given one of the scrolls to keep, and when it was time to read that scroll in the synagogue, when it was that time to read Isaiah 61, in this case, somebody from the family took the scroll and read it. That's an interesting idea because, let's go to the next picture here, Jay. This is called the seat of Moses. This is in the synagogue in Nazareth, which is a kind of a rubble today, but this is still there. The seat of Moses was unoccupied. It was sort of an ornamental stone seat because the seat of Moses was for the coming Messiah. No one was to ever sit in this seat until the Messiah came. So what I'm about to read to you that Jesus said when he opened the scroll of Isaiah 61, which was given to his family for safekeeping, what I'm about to read to you that he said, after he said this, he sat down in this seat. So nobody for centuries had ever sat down in this seat because they weren't the Messiah. So when he sat down in this seat, he was saying something, even more than what he proclaimed to them. So this is in Luke chapter 4. This is in your notes, by the way, if you want to follow along. It starts in verse 14. Then Jesus returned to Galilee, filled with the Holy Spirit's power. Reports about him spread quickly through the whole region. He taught regularly in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. And when he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures. The scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where this was written. So he unrolls the scroll, he finds this exact place. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. And he rolled up the scroll and he handed it back to the attendant, and he sat down in that seat. All eyes on the synagogue looked at him intently. I bet they did. What is this guy doing? Then he began to speak to them. The scripture you've just heard has been fulfilled this very day. The scripture you just heard has been fulfilled this very day. He's saying, I'm the Messiah, make no mistake about it. I'm sitting in this chair because of it, and I'm quoting the prophecy about the Messiah from Isaiah 61 to tell you what my job description is. And central to his job description, a very, very simple job description, is that Jesus came to set captives free. That's his family business. The Trinity's family business is to set captives free. What is a captive? A captive is somebody who's been caught and incarcerated by something. They have lost their freedom. They're not able to live a free life because they are behind bars. And what he means by this kind of captivity is not the physical bars. The people understood when he said this, the captivity was not just their captivity by Roman oppressors, but it meant far more than that. That there are captivities that go far beyond bars. Jesus has come to set captives free. What's our captivity? For most of us, it's the lies that bind us, not the ties that bind us. Our primary captivity is the lies that we've come to believe about ourselves. And these are insidious. We do have an enemy who is seeking whom to devour. Jesus said it over and over again. His primary tool in that destruction is deception. His primary purpose in deceiving us is to deceive us about our own story and about who we really are. If he can plant deceptive lies inside our own story, then we self-destruct. You saw it with Todd Anderson. He's lived with the lies that we have written up here his whole life. Kind of coalesced into that one word, shame. That's the weed in his soul. How will Todd Anderson ever be free? He needs somebody who's brave enough and bold enough to pull the weed out of him. He needs somebody. But he's not going to get it from just any teacher at his boarding school. It's going to take someone extraordinary for that job. I know from asking people over the years to talk about the lies they're captive to, that When I do this, when I ask people, write down a lie that you believe about yourself, about 80 to 90% of the people in that room, whoever they are, adults or kids, will say, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Some version of that. It's a very, very effective lie. The purpose of it is to take you out. The enemy of God sees you as a threat. The easiest way to take you out is to get you to believe that you are not enough. And then he'll point out all the evidence that backs up that claim. He'll point out all the times that you weren't enough, and he'll move it from a deceptive lie to your very identity, that you see yourself as a not enough person. It's brilliant if you're trying to destroy humanity, to get them to believe collectively that none of you is enough, because none of us will do what we have every ability and authority to do, just bring light into the darkness. A couple of quick stories here as we close off here to illustrate Jesus setting captives free. The first one is in Luke chapter 8, starting in verse 40. So Jesus is asked by an official in the synagogue named Jairus to come and heal his daughter who's about to die. Jesus agrees, and while he's on the way, he's in this crowded square, a woman comes up behind him. Here's her story. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus said. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, "Master, the whole crowd's pressing up against you." But Jesus said, "Hey, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out of me." When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Yes, he heals her bleeding. But she has a deeper problem. She has shame, fear, insecurity. She has lived her whole life with this malady that does not allow her to be in public community. She's shunned. And she takes the risk to come in a public place and touch the rabbi's cloak. And he could have left her to slink away into the crowd. If his primary consideration was empathy, that's what he would have done. He would not have pointed out this woman in the crowd, but he won't hear of it until she says it was her. Why? Think about what John Keating is doing with Todd Anderson. "No, Todd, I'm going to force that poem out of you." And to this woman, he says, "You're not leaving here until in this public place, this whole crowd knows your shame is over." This woman crowd is no longer shunned. She has no condition now that should keep her from community with you. She's no longer under the shadow of shame. This is her deeper healing. This is the thing that will save her life. Yes, the physical healing is important, but the emotional, spiritual healing that he forces out of her in this public space is even bigger. Let's do one last one real quick here. This is from John chapter 21, one of my favorite scenes in all the Bible. Jesus is resurrected. His disciples don't know what to do in the interim, so they go out fishing all night. They don't catch anything. See this guy on the shore. John says, "Hey, that looks like Jesus on the shore." Peter sees it's Jesus, jumps over the side of the boat, thrashes his way to the beach. They eat a little fish breakfast, and then Jesus takes a little walk with Peter. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Well, then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "And take care of my sheep," Jesus said. Third time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that he asked the question a third time, and he said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." And then he tells him how he's going to die. Peter all along had said, "Jesus, I'm going to die for you. Jesus, I'm going to die for you." And then he betrays him to a little girl. Not only does Jesus say, "Do you love me?" 3 times, "Feed my sheep," but then he says, "Oh, and Peter, you are going to die for me." Yes. But what is Jesus doing? Peter denies him 3 times. Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? He is surfacing the toxin inside of Peter, the shame that he holds. This is a man who would never betray a close friend, especially when he said repeatedly in public that he'll go down swinging for him. He would never do what he did, and he did it. He has lost his identity. The story he tells himself, Jesus 3 times asks him, do you love me? Peter gets the chance to say yes 3 times, as painful as it is. He's hurt because the real pain that's in him is being surfaced. And Jesus doesn't just ask him, do you love me? He says, okay, Peter, go feed my sheep. What he's really saying is, I'm trusting the church to you, Peter. Go feed my sheep now. Not only do I not hold this against you, but I know who you are. You're the same guy I called in the first place, and you are going to help plant the church around the world. Go feed my sheep. Let's be done with this now. But this has to happen before the church can grow. It has to happen. Jesus is so shrewd in his redemptive intent towards us. Now, you've heard people describe the gospel as good news. And boy, it certainly is good news, but it sounds kind of, namby-pamby neutral when we hear that now. Here's the good news. If you feel captive, he's coming after you. Whatever captivity you walked into this room tonight, he can't take his eyes off you, and he's intent on freeing you from that captivity, whatever it is, because this is the family business. This is why he sat down in the seat of Moses. It's why he read from Isaiah 61 and focused the central orbital heavy load in the middle of that, which is, I have come to set captives free. That's what I do 24/7. It's what I'm doing right now. Let's close by doing this. Everybody stand up, would you? Everybody stand up. Let's just close our eyes. Just close your eyes. Just keep them closed. I'm just curious. It's nice that the lights are going down right now. I'm just curious. If you feel like you're in captivity to something, just slip your hand up. Slip your hand up. You can slip it back down once you get it up there. Okay. Hey, gang. There's a lot of us in this room that feel that we're captive. Here's what I'd like you to do. Just follow what I say to do now. Don't think about it. Just do it. You're not going to be embarrassed. All our eyes are closed. You're not going to have to talk to anyone. Think about that captivity in your life right now. Picture it. What's a symbol of it? Now, I'd like you to cup your hands together in front of you. Just make a little cup with your 2 hands. Keep your eyes closed. Just cup your hands in front of you. Just imagine that you're holding whatever that is in your hands. That you're holding it there in your hands, like your hands are a bowl. And whatever that is that you're thinking about has been poured into your hands. All right? Just keep your eyes closed. You can do all this with your eyes closed. Now I'd like you to risk a little bit and just lift your cupped hands above your head and offer that, whatever it is, to Jesus. Just lift them up. This takes courage. Lift them up. Offer it to Jesus. Lower them down. Imagine your hands as empty now. There's nothing there. You've just offered it, gave it to Jesus. There's nothing there in your empty hands anymore. Now I'd like you to ask Jesus to fill those empty cupped hands with his strength. This is the same strength that created and redeemed the whole world. Just imagine him pouring that strength into your hands right now, filling them with living water. Now lift those cupped hands and drink that water. Just lift them up to your mouth, drink it down. And when you're done, just take your arm and wipe it across your face. He came to set captives free. That includes you and me.